Step 2, we're learning what this second step in the Sacred Self-Healing Program is for. My name is Jona Bryndis. You all know me. And we're going to jump right in. So let's make sure that what we are talking about here, we're talking about step 2, which is called ego control. And before I go into this, just real quick, the program is designed to address our dualities within. Yeah, and I'm explaining this in step 1. We talked a little bit about this in step 1, how I'm looking at this duality, yeah, our inner back and forth, as sort of the core of all problems, the core of all addictions, the core of all our problems in life. Now, you might want to say, yeah, but what about the outer stuff, and what about this, and what about that? That is correct. We also have to deal with outer conditions. We have to contend with at least 2 different realities within ourselves, namely that what is happening here in the material, physical world, including our own home, including our own goals and our ability to follow through or to actually manifest it, and our inner life, which is sort of our hopes, our dreams, our wishes, our goals. That in and of itself is already what we call duality. Yeah, so you experiencing your reality in 2 different ways as a duo. Okay, and this duality, yeah, creates conflicts in you. Yeah, it's like this contradiction between what you want and what you get. Yeah, and when you investigate this a little bit, and then I'm going to go into like sort of what it actually is that can help us to identify this better and work with this inner contradiction, this inner confliction, yeah, and perhaps find ways to harmonize this a little bit. What it actually is that we are experiencing as sort of this a contradiction in us, which is a sort of mostly mental, intellectual experience within ourselves, yeah, is obviously that, we just can't get what we want. Now, you might ask yourself now, why am I going on and on about this inner contradiction and duality and such words? That's because it's very important for us to understand the mechanics of our suffering, of our struggle, before we can actually start thinking about how to harmonize it, how to heal it, how to make it go away, no matter what it is. No matter whether it is a physical pain, no matter whether it is an emotional pain or struggle, no matter whether it's an intellectual pain or struggle or a spiritual pain or struggle. The investigation of what it actually is in you that works against it is sort of the fundamental step. And I also mentioned that the 24 Sacred Self-Healing Step program is actually based, it's inspired by the 12-step program. Yeah, Alcoholics Anonymous, for most of you AA, all right, and I investigated the healing methods, yeah, the energetic and the spiritual healing that occurs through the 12-step program in people, or that can occur. It doesn't do it for everybody, but it does it for a very, very high number of people compared to any of our psychological or medical science attempts to heal addiction. The 12-step program appears to be the most successful. And there are many elements, obviously, in the 12-step program, and they can be applied to many, many different kinds of struggle. Yeah, not just alcoholism or substance abuse, but many other aspects as well. So, as a healer, I investigated these elements of the 12-step program that are actually helping people. And I came to understand that when we work ourselves through our inner world first, it becomes a lot easier to deal with things that we experience in the outer world. Why? Because we can understand ourselves better. And so I called the 24-step self-healing program actually the journey of self-discovery and self-healing. Yeah, so every 12 step from the 12-step program has 2 steps here in the Sacred Self-Healing Program pointing at the duality. And I'm underlining this in the self-study and the self-reflection part of this program, where you listen to these guided meditations that help you align your energy to what sort of the healing task is in each step, by using 2 different voices. So when you listen to the guided meditation for step 2, you will find that the voice is a male voice. Yeah, it's Jeff Casper's voice. Yeah, and you know that this is something that I did on purpose, because when we address these different aspects, these different dualities within ourselves, they often internally sound differently, and they trigger different responses in us. So here, just sort of a hint at something that we will discuss later in step 12, namely that this inner duality, this inner polarity that we feel, this, back and forth and either or and black and white and all these, that is actually a normal thing. And that when we look at the nature of these inner dualities, we find out that they are very similar, or if you can relate to this, to masculine and feminine energies. So the, the, the odd number, the first step in each of these 2-step segments, is always spoken by me, and it reflects, yeah, the softness and the healing space. The second part of this 2-step program, yeah, each step having 2 steps really, is spoken by Jeff, bringing in the masculine energy, the resolution part, but also the part that actually puts the finger on the problem. So if you are having a little bit difficulties with the male voice, that indicates to you that there are aspects in you around authority, around identity, and around problem solving, yeah, or decision making, that are not entirely sort of harmonized within you. And if you have problems with the female voice that is speaking directly to your heart, and you can't really feel anything there, and it maybe even repels you. Yeah, you can have this on either side, that one of the voices repels you. But if that is occurring with the odd number steps, all right, then that tells you that there still are a lot of walls around your heart. Yeah, that you still need to work on opening your heart a little bit more. So let's have a look here at step 2, and so what it actually is that this step is pointing out. Now, there's always a workbook part, a written part that talks a lot about ego. I would like with you here, real quick, define these words that we are yeah, that we are working with here in these 24 steps. So, what is ego? I'm not going to answer this. I would love to hear you share. Yeah, what do you experience as your ego? But I will give it a little framework. We can talk about the ego in a psychological sense that refers to aspects of our personality, aspects of our behavior. We can talk about our ego in conjunction with our biological instincts, yeah, with sort of hardwired behavior patterns, yeah, that we're not actually directly choosing, that are more or less part of how we are constructed as humans. For example, reflexes or automatic defenses, things that have to do with our survival instinct. So we can see this on a biological level, that is our physical survival. We can look at it from a psychological, which has to do with our emotional survival. And then we can also look at it from a spiritual perspective. This is less common, yeah, especially if you listening to sort of popular uh, psychological or life coaching or self-help authors. They will mainly refer to the psychological version of ego, but here in the Sacred Self-Healing Program with step 2, we're actually introducing sort of the spiritual component of our ego as well. So now I would love to hear from you. What do you experience as your ego? What is ego for you?
Hi, Jona. I think for
Hi.
I think for me, ego is sort of the automatic response, sort of like the adrenaline, the protector, that along that line.
That's primarily the biological and the neurological aspect of the ego, right? It's the knee-jerk reactions that we all have, right? Now, if you refer this a bit more to your emotions, what comes up there? How does your ego show up in sort of your emotional life and in your personality?
I think my ego is fear.
Fear-based. Okay, so give us an example. I mean, I love that you're sharing this. How do you perceive that?
I guess how I perceive it is when I'm in fear, I think, oh, that's my ego, and I can just calm my ego and go into my heart and sort of I sort of work more the reverse of the ego
Okay.
than and so to me it's the like you say the knee jerk that makes me think, oh no, slow down.
Okay, so you're already talking about how to differentiate that, right? How to know when you're in your ego and how to know when you're in your heart,
Oh, maybe.
yeah, you've already identified that there is a duality there. So when you're in your are you saying that when you're in your ego, you can't really be or can't really feel your heart? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the ego
Hmm.
seems sort of overwhelmingly strong
And
unless
it
I
and
rein
it
it in.
does things, right? It does
Yeah,
things without us necessarily wanting it, or things that we regret. Yeah, so we have to understand that there is a part in us that does things without us necessarily being able to control that. Yeah. So an example is, you get really heated up in a discussion or whatever, and you say something mean, to your children or your partner, right? That's an emotional sort of ego that is coming forward there, right? So we're like, wow, 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 and it gets intense, 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 and then was saying something, and then you realize later, I was quite emotional there, right? We often call it us being emotional. But I would like you guys all to decouple these two. Okay. Yeah, because having emotions is actually not always the ego. Having emotions is just part of your normal humanness. And we're supposed to have emotions, and they're very, very good guides for us. Being in our ego and reacting in a knee-jerk way, yeah, sort of a hardwired way, that's the problem. And I think what you were pointing at when you said in fear or fear-based is sort of a personality trait that you uncovered in yourself that is sort of more anxious, defensive, or is that what you mean, Linda? That it's sort of
Yeah.
whenever you feel attacked or whenever you feel that you could lose something or that you could make a mistake or whatever, that there's a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, I think I see it the most when I'm in traffic. And so
Mm,
somebody does something and I realize that my knee-jerk reaction is fear. Like I'm thinking,
mm.
that almost got me in an accident. And that whole sort of irrational thought process is what I feel is ego.
Okay, cool. So you brought in another descriptor that we often use. We call ourselves, or we call our behavior emotional or irrational. Yeah, and that is typically what we're saying with that is that there are things that maybe they're like overreacting to something, yeah, in that sort of knee-jerk way that we're not always in control of. And this can be fear-based, this can be anger-based, this can be shame-based, this can be pride-based, yeah. It can also be pain-based, yeah. There's many different reasons why we all can get pulled into our ego, yeah, into this sort of knee-jerk reaction, and extreme forms of that are trauma, yeah, so anything that has to do with sort of a stored trauma in us, or the crises. A lot of times, connected with memories that we have of negative feelings or painful feelings in the past. So there's many different reasons why we go there. But right now, I would rather talk about the mechanism that does that is occurring within us, rather than what brings that on and what can we do about this, because we're going to talk about this for 22 more steps. Okay, it's not an easy undertaking. But if we go a little bit further here, so we got the biological, the neurological, we got the psychological, which is a little bit of a mixture of the neurological and the emotional. Yeah, we got the emotional, we got the mental. Now, what could be an example for our ego showing up or taking over in sort of our intellectual mental area? Anything that comes to mind?
Something that I'm fighting with is um, the concept of there can be two right answers, and my ego sees one right answer. And I
All
know that
right. Good. Okay, so there's an opinion here, okay? Or something that has to do with the belief system, right? So what I hear you say is that your belief is that there can only be one right. Yeah? And if there can only be one right, then then the others might be they must be wrong. That's a belief. Yeah, that's a belief. That is a mental construct. Okay. Yeah, and a fight over that. So other examples would be having a political discussion, and disagreeing with somebody else who has a different political affiliation, or exchanging ideas, or like just simply having disagreements with other people. Those are primarily, when it's sort of on that debate level, yeah, primarily intellectual, mental sort of contradictions or conflictions that have to do with that intellectual ego that we have. Yeah, it's like, okay, no, I think I'm right. Okay, and you think you're right. Okay, and well, we're having a conflict there. This can even sometimes happen within ourselves. Have you ever experienced something like this, Linda? Like an inner debate where one part of you says
Oh, I'm
this and the
sure. I just
other
can't
part
come up
that
with
says
an
that.
example. Yeah. I
Going
can't.
back and forth. I know
Yeah.
people have a lot of those debates when it comes to like following through on their intentions or their goals. For example, weight loss goals, or dieting, or um, sort of exercising, and stuff like that. Yeah, where one part of you says, "Oh no, it's like too late already," or "I had a tough day today, and it's not a good time to exercise." And where the other part of you says, "Yeah, but this is the healthier thing to do, and we promised ourselves that we would do it." Stuff like that. That is all located in our intellect. Yeah, this is in our cognition. This is has to do with how we think about things. It gets a little bit more complicated when it comes to the unconscious beliefs. So unconscious beliefs is something that we're going to discuss here in the further steps, because with unconscious beliefs we're experiencing an inner confliction that we're not even aware of. Yeah, an example here would just real quick would be, for example, that yes, you want to make a lot of money, you want to be rich, but deep down you actually have a resentment toward rich people, or there's a sort of an unconscious belief in you that all rich people are criminals or non-integrous persons. So this creates an inner conflict in you on a deeper level, but it's still located in that sort of cognitive part of you. Now, lastly, what is ego on a spiritual level? Seen through spiritual eyes. How does ego express there, or can ego express there? That's trickier, isn't it?
Yeah. It feels like it can't. It shouldn't be able to.
Okay, so there's a belief here underneath what you just said, right? And I'm hearing, because I happen to know this about you, that you already have a little bit of spiritual training. So you are basically saying something along those lines, that when ego is in control, spirit can't enter, or you can't really be connected with spirit or be spiritual. Is that what you're saying? I don't want to
Yeah. It sort of
paraphrase.
disconnects. For me, when ego gets in, it sort of disconnects my spiritual connection.
Okay. Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing this, because this is really what this step is about. It is about us recognizing that when whichever part of ego, yeah, whichever expression of our ego is interfering or taking over control or dominating our reactions or our emotions or our thought processes, that we can't really fully connect with something, let's just call this, with our inner divinity, with our heart, with spirit, with the divine, with God. So you are already sharing, it's a spiritual perspective, but you're also sharing sort of a belief along with that, namely that basically it's either ego or spirit, right? It's like the ego is kind of like an adversarial force. It disconnects us or distances us from something spiritual. This is really important to understand in its very fundamental meaning. Yeah, because when we are not able to identify when we are in our ego or not, yeah, and for the most part, guys, not to discourage you here, but for the most part, we all, me too, are in our egos most of the time. But for me to be able to say this, okay, it already requires me having this experience of when I'm not in my ego. And this is what this is about. So for now, I don't really want you guys to go home with this idea that ego is all bad. I want to keep this an open question. I want to first and foremost talk about the mechanics, namely what the ego can do to us. And this is what step 2 is all about. Because no matter whether it's on a physical, emotional, intellectual, or spiritual level, what happens when our ego is dominating our responses, our interactions, even our thoughts, is a control mechanism. It is trying to control something. And this is very, very important for us because a lot of people understand control as, well, controlling other people or manipulating them, or, don't even go there. Let's just sort of look at it from a perspective of who is in control. So when we are in our ego, this so far we have agreed, then the true me, yeah, my true self, my, if you will, sort of the best in me, the higher self in me, is not in control. It is the ego, yeah, that is, shouting at the other person in a discussion, or getting pulled into road rage, yeah, or doing things out of fear, or not doing things out of fear. Yeah, it is that part in us, yeah, that sort of controls our better intentions, our better knowing a lot of times as well. Yeah. In those moments, yeah, where the ego is in charge. And that is what we need to learn to identify better, because if we can get to the bottom of this, if we can get to the bottom of control in us, who and what is controlling me right now, and how can I perhaps regain control so that I can respond, interact, yeah, to the world, to the things that come in from the outside, to the world, to the aspects of my inner reality more authentically, or in a more true or truthful way. So you will also hear the word serenity in this step, especially in the guided meditation. Yeah, and I want to clarify with you what this word means. Serenity is a word that's very, very popular in 12-step circles. Yeah, it goes along those lines of understanding sort of what you can and what you can't control, and having the courage to focus on what you can control. And here we can see that there's a connection here with ego and ego control, all right? Because if it's all about control, yeah, who's in charge here, okay, the ego has a different way of approaching this than most of our true selves. Yeah, the ego mostly sees things from the perspective of needing to win, needing to be first, needing to be louder, needing to be more powerful, needing to, I don't know, being right, yeah, needing to be the best, needing to be the most beautiful, okay? In the ego's world, if we just, call it this way right now, yeah, in the ego world, or in our inner sort of ego compartment, we are basically approaching everything like a 3-year-old would. Yeah. Yeah, so if somebody else has a cookie, we'll try to get that, and we'll try to get more than the other, and we'll try to get the most sort of out of situations. We will immediately defend ourselves. We will not put the other person's feelings into account. We will not look at the bigger picture, simply because we can't. And that's kind of like how I suggest that you look at ego. Ego is not really able to see the big picture. Ego is more or less a knee-jerk reaction. Okay, and if we want to move into states of serenity where we can make better choices, where we can discern, whether, for example, all this road rage is maybe just a waste of energy, because the people can't really hear me anyway, or that it is maybe just an expression of something else, of repressed anger in me, and that I just needed a trigger to let this out. Yeah, maybe it's even linked to some kind of trauma that I have. Yeah, so there's many different layers underneath why our ego tries to dominate situations in our lives. Yeah, so we're going to work on this here throughout these 24 steps, and we're going to learn techniques and modalities how to actually end up, or how to gain, higher levels of serenity, in which we become able to choose consciously what we're going to say, how we're going to react, how we're going to manage things. Okay, so serenity is a state of sort of regaining control. And a lot of times, and this is so surprising to our ego, a lot of times through just simply admitting, well, that we're not in control right now. Yeah, that there are things that we cannot control, and that it makes no sense really for me to obsess about them, or to put all my effort into making them go away. Yeah, let's take weather. There's not a lot that you can do about the weather, where you live. I mean, you can move away, into a different climate zone, so you have different weather, whatever you perceive as better weather. But that too needs to be defined first. I find that, because I've moved around a lot, that no matter where you go, people are complaining about the weather. Yeah, whether you go into areas where it's warm, they complain about it, the warmth and the hotness. And if you go into areas where it's very cold, they complain about the coldness. And if you go into areas where there's no wind, they'll complain about no wind. And if you go into windy areas, they'll complain about the windiness. You get what I'm talking about. So we need to define for ourselves, first and foremost, before we want to get into this place of making choices, what it actually is that we are resisting, and what it actually is that we want. Yeah, this conflict in us needs to originate somewhere, and it always, guys, it always originates in, you having this inner contradiction between what you want and what you are actually experiencing. And as a healer, as a coach, as a therapist, I can tell you that a lot of times this contradiction can actually be harmonized, because a lot of times it's in the way we see things. Yeah, like, what is success? Yeah, what are these things in redefining, reframing things? Yeah, and sometimes even as simple as, like, do I truly want this? Or is this really worth it for me? Questions like that. Yeah, they also belong to the category of serenity. You will also hear quite a bit about attachments. So attachments is a word that comes out of the New Age, Eastern philosophy, Eastern spiritual traditions, but also psychology. So an attachment is something that you do not want to let go of. It is something that you're holding on to knuckled. Now, the easiest way for us to understand an attachment is when we look at children and child psychology, and we know that, very little children, toddlers, infants, even stronger so, do not want to be separated from their parents. They don't like it when you put them down. They want to be held. They want to be carried around. They don't want you to leave the room or anything like that. And that is, normal developmental stage in our human development, yeah, where we have a very, very strong attachment to something. We don't feel safe without it. So throughout our maturing phase, we detach from things bit by bit, and we sort of venture out into the world, and we want to explore, and curiosity takes over. And even though we still can feel the fear of leaving what is safe, we are more curious about what is out there, that we learn to overcome our attachments. Yeah, and then the older we get, yeah, the more sort of we would simply choose what we want to attach to. And there's different intensity levels. There's, like levels that are pathological. Think of people that need to have specific items with them at all times. They cannot feel safe without a certain, a pair of socks, or a certain talisman or charm, or something that they that they think they need, okay, to feel safe. Now, again, in children that carry their blankie around, it's considered to be healthy. But if a grown-up would walk around with their blankie, okay, we would consider this to be, an unhealthy attachment. Now, when we shift this into the energetic and spiritual perspective, not just a psychological, we're talking about more than that. We're talking about things that can sort of dominate our uh, ability to make choices. Yeah, anything that is so strong, perhaps the word obsessive is also good here in that area of discussion. Yeah, like things that are consciously or unconsciously uh, so in the foreground, in the focus of our attention, that we perhaps lose track, or the ability to be fully present, or see other things. So it can also mean like a super narrow focus of just one thing. Yeah, it can mean an obsession. It can mean, in an energetic sense, actually something that is also attached to you. So in energy healing, yeah, these things can be seen as actual attachments to your body in an energetic sense. And then in a spiritual or esoteric or occult sense, it can mean that an actual entity, yeah, or energy has attached to you, to your energy field, okay, and that you're basically walking around with, sort of foreign energies. These are, just to give you here the whole scale of what the word attachment can mean. Yeah, in the psychological sense and in conjunction with the ego, we are talking about anything that you have like a little bit of too much focus on, that is, maybe a bit OCD, okay, or maybe a little bit in like addictions are, like a little bit too much. They're not healthy for you. Yeah, so we got to be careful here, because when it comes to attachments, there's healthy and unhealthy. And really what we are referring to when we talk about the ego is the stuff that our ego is sort of hardwired with, that we have never really questioned, and that can, as a matter of fact, be unhealthy for us. Yeah, so think of relationships. Relationships can become unhealthy for us when there is, an unhealthy attachment in play. So, what does the word payoff mean? That is also mentioned here in the workbook. The word payoff is something that comes from psychology. It is also often called self gain. Okay, so there are things that the ego does, even though it is maybe unhealthy for you, regardless of knowing that it is unhealthy. So with substance abuse, we can imagine that, anybody who smokes or who drinks alcohol or who takes drugs knows that there is sort of a damage that is done to the body, and yet we do it. Okay, so there's got to be something in us, okay, that makes us want to do it more than the downside of that. And that is in healing and also in therapy, sort of the first thing that we're trying to uncover. And this is what this step is really about. What does our ego get out of it? What's the payoff here? Why does it keep doing it? Even though me, the conscious me, doesn't actually like it, or it's not good for me. Yeah, why am I eating the bag of chips or the gallon of ice cream before going to bed, even though I know it's not good for me? What am I getting out of this? What does my ego get from this? Yeah, and what's the attraction here? This is the part, that makes healing such a difficult subject, because a lot of times, guys, it's not really anything that we need in order to heal. For the majority of the time, it is about letting something go. Yeah, so something is in the way. Something works against our efforts, yeah, to heal, to grow, yeah, to explore. And that's what this step here, step 2, is all about. It discusses sort of how we can learn, yeah, to get into the states of serenity, yeah, which also includes sometimes accepting the way things are, and especially admitting when things are not really in our control. And also committing to finding ways, yeah, that allow us to overcome these attachments, these payoffs. All right, so we're coming to the end of the step discussion here, but I want to point out to all of you that with every even number of steps, we are bringing in a quote from 12 step, yeah, and how this step, or this dual step, this double step, yeah, step 1 and 2, can be used for 12-step work. So the corresponding step 1 in AA or in 12-step is quoted as, "We admitted we were powerless, that our lives had become unmanageable." And this is basically the goal of these first 2 steps, that we get into a place where we can recognize that sometimes, maybe not always, our ego is running the show. And that is, or can be, yeah, maybe more often than we want it to, be unhealthy or not conducive for us. Yeah, not conducive means that it's not actually representing who we truly are. And instead of going against the ego, instead of going against all these things that distract us, that scare us, that make us do things, yeah, that make us angry, resentful, or that pull us into shame or guilt or sadness, all right, we want to first investigate how this is even working within us. So I want to invite you in this step 2, yeah, to not immediately jump into the conclusion that your ego is the bad part of you. But I want to invite you to look at it more as the unconscious part of you, as the part of you that still believes that, you know, dog eats dog, or, having to be the first, or taking out all your enemies, fighting against everything that is bad, being very opinionated, all this, that is a conducive strategy, that is a good way of living your life. For most of you, yeah, your values are in the right place. It's not that you have the wrong values. It's just that you really don't know yet how your ego hasn't really caught up to that yet. So I would like to suggest that you begin to see your ego as a part of you, but more so as the younger, the more immature, the sort of the puppy in yourself, yeah, that hasn't really developed the skill that your true self, yeah, the part in you that can be conscious and that knows who you truly are and what your true values are, hasn't really caught up with it yet. Yeah. So without judging your ego, yeah, we have to become able to investigate these ego, these knee-jerk reaction within ourselves without going against it, and by simply admitting that we have one. So my invitation for you is, don't judge yourself. Just recognize that there are moments in your life, times in your life, or during your day, when it is not the true you acting, but when it's the ego part of you, the part in you, yeah, that is not really sophisticated enough yet, okay, to understand that what is healthier, what is more loving, what is more beautiful, what is more based on contribution and sharing and cooperating and balance and harmony, yeah, that is actually the better strategy. So we kind of have to help this part in us heal, and that's what we're going to do for the remaining 22 steps, guys. And we're going to go through all the layers of that, including the physical, including the emotional, including pain, including relationships, including your inner child. Yes, including trauma, including karma, including masculine, feminine energies, including your etheric energies, including higher love and higher expressions, including contribution, yeah, and also legacy. So we have a wonderful and exciting journey ahead of us here, going these steps together. Thank you so much for joining me, and all those who have walked the path before you, who are walking it with you here in the Sacred Self Healing community, and who will walk this path after you, or maybe even with your help. Thank you so much for listening, and please share and ask questions wherever you see this video.
Thank you, Jona.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.